5. We're going to go ahead and call the work session to order. The way we're going to do this tonight, we've got a couple different things on the, we got 2 on the agenda. The first hour we're going to spend on discussion on the substitute resolution on the Westlake landfill. And I know that we have 4 groups that are with us tonight. I have your business cards. I kind of randomly shuffled them into trying to figure out a way to figure out who's going to speak first. What I'm going to ask each person to do is to take no more than 10 minutes. That way we'll still be able to wrap it up in an hour and still have enough time to get some questions at the end. Ed Smith with Safe Energy Director. You're first. Congratulations.
Thank you. And I brought a PowerPoint, if that's okay.
Sure.
So I apologize in advance if this is a bumpy ride. I've got a lot to cover. All right, I'll just say next every time. Okay, next. So we support the St. Louis Army Corps of Engineers, formerly utilized site remedial action program, being put in charge of the Westlake landfill site for several reasons. Just a brief history about the landfill and why we're at where we're at now. In 1960, it all started with the purification of uranium in downtown St. Louis for nuclear weapons. A lot of that material was brought to the St. Louis airport. In 1966, the Atomic Energy Commission sold that material to a private company. That changed hands a couple times and ended up in the hands of the Cotter Corporation. They moved it to the Hazelwood Laddie Avenue site, where they kiln dried a lot of these wastes because it was cheaper to ship dry, lighter wastes than heavier, wetter wastes to their facility out in Colorado. They shut their program down there right around 1970. Then the Atomic Energy Commission asked them to decommission the site because the AEC was in charge of monitoring what happened there. In 1973, Cotter Corporation spread a bunch of leach barium sulfate, 8,700 tons across the topsoil of the Laddie Avenue site, scooped up the top 18 inches of soil, which is important because a lot of other radioactive material other than the leached barium sulfate was at that site, so that leached into this topsoil. So the misnomer that this 8,700 tons only of leached barium sulfate is incorrect. 1974, the Atomic Energy Commission did a report on the decommissioning of the Hazelwood site. That's where we learned about where the radioactive wastes went to the Westlake landfill. And in 1975, well, first, let me back up again. The Atomic Energy Commission was dismantled later in 1974. They were the promoter and regulator of nuclear power in this country. Congress saw a problem in that, so they separated that into the modern day Department of Energy, promoter of nuclear power, and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the regulator. In 1974, Congress also created FUSRAP, meant to address radioactive wastes related to nuclear weapons in our environment. 1975, the regulator, the NRC, took over jurisdiction of the Westlake landfill. 1990, the Department of Energy, which was in charge of this FUSRAP, decided that the downtown site, the airport site, and the Hazelwood site all qualified as FUSRAP, but the Westlake landfill did not. That laid the groundwork for the EPA putting it as a Superfund site. In 95, the NRC withdrew all of its jurisdiction, saying the EPA was handling it. And in 1997, Congress moved FUSRAP from the DOE to the Army Corps of Engineers. That's a little perspective on where we're at now. Next. This is the document in which the Department of Energy, when it was in charge of FUSRAP, if I can share all these documents with you guys as well, did not allow the Westlake landfill. You can see that last sentence as vicinity properties. A lot of this radioactive material migrated off-site from where it was originally placed, like Coldwater Creek. Those are known as vicinity properties. Westlake landfill was explicitly not included as a FUSRAP site, and we'll find out why next. In 1992, this was an internal document from the Department of Energy. The signature at the bottom is Alexander Williams. That'll be important in a moment. He's trying to say that it's not in the Department of Energy's financial interests to be the deep pockets for cleaning up Westlake, because there's more material there than just the radioactive waste that were dumped that they were in charge of. And then he goes on to discourage the DOE from cleaning up the site. The EPA would help move the financial burden from DOE, and at that point, the St. Louis Catholic Diocese, pardon me, from the financial burden of the Westlake landfill. Someone willed part of this landfill to the Catholic Church. Next. So in 1993, the the Environmental Protection Agency, they listed the DOE as a responsible party. The DOE was wrong. They do have liability at this site. The Department of Justice, I underlined at the bottom, concluded so. Next. And then in 1995, I just want to show you, this is the same guy that penned that DOE document that said, we're worried about this site because of the financial cost. Alexander Williams, I can send you again all these documents. At the very top, in a letter to Kay Dry, he even underscores budgetary issues have never played a role in the designation of sites, which is obviously incorrect based on what we've seen. Next. The DOE contributed to jurisdictional void, and what I mean by that is something that we just figured out. There has been nobody paying attention to the haul routes between the Laddie Avenue site in Hazelwood and the Westlake landfill. Actually, Harvey Ferdman in attendance here helped figure that out. So we're working on trying to figure out if FUSRAP should be in charge of that under the Corps of Engineers, or the EPA should be in charge next. Current financially responsible parties are as listed. General Atomics makes drones and other radioactive weaponry for the federal government. Republic Services has 2 subsidiaries as financially responsible parties, as well as the DOE. Next. In a recent op-ed in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Administrator Brooks said even under FUSRAP, any core site cleanup would have to follow the same Superfund rules that EPA is following now. That's true, but there are differences between the two and their application of those laws. Next. So this is a prime example. The financially responsible parties are in charge of hiring the firm to evaluate site risk and health impacts. FUSRAP with the Corps, that's independent government agency experts, and not the financially responsible parties contractors. A recent example of this was EPA Region 7 tasked the responsible parties with coming up with a report. What happens if a smoldering fire reaches the radioactive material? The contractor hired by the responsible parties' conclusion was there is no environmental or health impact. The EPA's Office of Research and Development, Department of Natural Resources, independent landfill fire expert, and the Department of Health and Senior Services all disagree with that conclusion. Next. EPA Superfund versus Corps. Again, the financially responsible parties can legally challenge and delay EPA decisions if they cost too much. In 2008, the EPA made a decision to leave the radioactive waste there. That was the cheapest option at the time. It still remains the cheapest option. So you really haven't seen opposition from the responsible parties. They could keep that decision tied up in court, though, if the EPA comes back and says, we do need to remove these wastes, we were wrong, and that's going to cost you more. With the Corps of Engineers, again, this is all our understanding of this. It would have been great if the Corps was here tonight to back this up, but the financially responsible parties cannot legally challenge Corps decisions. Next. This is just funding sources. EPA and FUSRAP both get revenues from Congress. And then while Superfund sites, they rely on the responsible parties to pay in advance or during the cleanup. With Corps, once they make their decision, they execute that decision, probably because it's in the best interest of the people around that site to address it properly, quickly. And then they go into negotiations after the fact with the responsible parties. Next. This is just an idea of what the community outreach websites look like for EPA, just a listing of documents. We're trying to encourage them to better organize it. Next. With the Corps, they have a list of newsletters and community engagement, history of the cleanup, other sites, a really very great interactive website for the community to be able to try and wrap their minds around what's going on. Next. Listening to community concerns, FUSRAP, they heard the concerns of people about Coldwater Creek. They agreed to test over 2,000 points along the creek to see if there's any radioactive material along the creek. And when we addressed our concerns about what was actually dumped at the Westlake landfill, backed up with a report from a geochemist at Washington University by the name of Dr. Chris. EPA Region 7 said to our concerns, they didn't give us a scientific response. They gave us a very qualitative anecdotal response, which is the responsible parties likely didn't leave behind a whole lot of extra radioactive waste because they found that material valuable, therefore it went to Colorado. It's very frustrating to hear that when we have a scientific paper that's over a year old now challenging the EPA's fundamental understanding of the radioactive material at the landfill. Next. Fire problems. In 1995, there was a document submitted to EPA Region 7 detailing a fire in the OU2 Bridgeton landfill side of the fence within the landfill. So fires have been an issue historically at this landfill. Next. This is the document that informed EPA Region 7 of that fire, received Superfund Branch Region 7, 1995. Next. Here's they're discussing fire in a report submitted to Region 7. Next. This is just a visualization of the map, so you can have a little bit of an idea about what the next map tells us. The bottom is where the smoldering fire is taking place. The yellow area is where current efforts are to stop the fire from moving north into the North Quarry, which is where that 1,300-foot number is. And the estimated area of radioactive waste is right along there in OU1, Area 1, that's outlined, and kind of along that green border and the red border is where the isolation barrier work is currently taking place. Next. This is a detailed map, kind of where the 1994 suspected fire was. That was a suspected smoldering fire. You can see that was pretty darn close to the radioactive material. Then in 1992, that was the confirmed surface fire. Next. Did the EPA ever consider a landfill fire a threat to the radioactive waste? This is a question we asked EPA Region 7. To their credit, we were able to establish a relationship where we sent them questions once a month and they responded. So thankfully they responded and told us the truth that they did not in fact consider any sort of fire threat to the radioactive waste when making that decision to leave it there in 2008. Next. Again, smoldering fire started in 2010. EPA, because of the supplemental feasibility study, which was the first thing conducted after the investigation of what to do was reopened in 2010 or 2009, right around there. EPA Region 7, this was a conversation I had with the Remedy Review Board, did not inform the people who were overseeing their work at this landfill to try and get more studies to find out what's the best thing to do. EPA Region 7 did not tell the Remedy Review Board there was a smoldering fire 1,000 feet away from the radioactive waste. Probably would have changed a few of their calculations on what they asked EPA Region 7 to do for further site study. Then there was a Wall Street Journal article earlier this year alleging that the EPA Region 7 was using some coercive tactics to make this review of the Remedy Review Board private, something that had never been done before, according to the Wall Street Journal. Next. Again, when asked, EPA Region 7 never consulted with the Corps of Engineers, even though FUSRAP Corps is in charge of the Laddie Avenue site where the Westlake wastes came from. EPA Region 7 did not think to consult them about the makeup of the material that they still had to remove from this site after the responsible parties supposedly scraped it clean and decommissioned it in 1973. The EPA never went back and looked at primary documents. That's how we found the 1974 Atomic Energy Commission report. This is stuff that an undergraduate researcher should be doing. And it's frustrating that this stuff can't happen on EPA's watch. They even, just as recently as 2012, the project manager, Dan Gravatt, incorrectly characterized what was dumped at Westlake landfill. He said, quote, 8,700 tons of leached barium sulfate with clean fill. That is in fact not the case. Next. Attorney General Koster, when asked, what about FUSRAP, what do you think? He said, well, the Corps would very possibly have to redo and rethink a lot of decisions that have occurred at the EPA level. That's what we're asking for. We're asking for a redo here. Next. That's what Dr. Chris's report calls for. Again, something I can make sure I get to you. He has a list of recommendations at the very back. He's a peer-reviewed Missouri River expert, especially the lower Missouri. And he's the head of the Stable Isotope Laboratory in the Department of Earth and Planetary Sciences. He's more than qualified to know what he's talking about, and his concerns have yet to be addressed by EPA. Next. Who supports FUSRAP? Westlake Landfill Community Group, Pattonville Fire Protection District, Franciscan Sisters of Mary, you can read the list. North County Incorporated, Pattonville School District. These aren't just environmental groups like mine. These are very serious community members. Next.
And I know you've got a lot to cover, but we're running
Wrap it
out of
up?
time.
All right,
Please.
well then, let's skip this one.
I think the last slide was important, if you don't mind flipping.
Oh yeah, flip back, sorry. Those are other, yes, sorry. Other municipalities and representatives that support the Corps of Engineers taking over, or the radioactive removal. Bridgeton City Council several times, County Council twice, St. Louis County, City of Blackjack, both of the senator and House and rep who are representing the district. Next. Take action, that's what Administrator Brooks said. He can't do it, so we need the federally elected officials to do it. We know the DOE doesn't want to do it. They can literally do this through their Office of Legacy Management if they wanted to. They've told us no recently, and a history at the DOE suggests they're not willing to take this on. Next. These are the folks that can help us, along with your resolution. Next. Yeah, I'm basically done, I think. Next.
Is this, can I ask you
Yeah.
questions?
Yeah,
To the end?
yeah, let's wait until the last 10 minutes if we could.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Smith, appreciate it. Russ Knock from Republic Services.
Well, hello. Thanks for the invitation to be here. My name is Russ Naki. I am the Director of Public Affairs for Republic Services. I'm pleased to represent more than 400 Republic Services employees throughout Greater St. Louis, many of whom live and serve in this community and are proud to do right by this community. If I could just indulge for 2 minutes to briefly touch on Bridgeton Landfill before we get to the topic at hand, which is FUSRAP and Westlake, only because I know that Bridgeton is also relevant to this body and to everybody here in attendance. I just want to point out that Bridgeton Landfill, a Republic Services subsidiary, recently released data from the second round of additional carbon monoxide testing in the North Quarry. The results from the month of March continued a favorable trend, a trend since January, confirming that all wells sampled in the North Quarry registered below the lowest possible reporting indicators for carbon monoxide. In fact, levels were non-detectable in nearly all wells. This and other data provides further confirmation that the subsurface smoldering event in the South Quarry has not impacted the North Quarry, which is the area closest in proximity to the radiological materials contained in Westlake Landfill. I also just want to briefly update you on some odor reduction progress with respect to odors at Bridgeton. As you are aware, we recently had a settlement, or the U.S. District Court for Eastern District of Missouri recently issued a preliminary approval of a settlement of more than $6.8 million to resolve claims with more than 400 homes in the vicinity of the site that the landfill was essentially a private nuisance. We are the first to acknowledge that the odors have been a source of considerable concern and public frustration. We share that frustration, and we sincerely appreciate this community's continued patience as we do everything within our power to resolve those odors. We, at the same time, are reassured by some publicly available MDNR data that conveys and depicts a steady and consistent decrease in odor occurrences since last summer. While there's more work to be done, we are optimistic that we are beginning to turn a corner at the site, specifically at Bridgeton Landfill. I say this because in the last 2 years, we've invested more than $100 million, significant time, effort, resources, and technology and personnel to do, again, everything that we can within our power to resolve the odor issues that this community's had to experience for the last 2 or so years. Perhaps the most anticipated development at the site is the start of construction on an isolation barrier. While the scientific data that we've seen strongly indicates that the radioactive material in Westlake Landfill is neither volatile nor vulnerable to heat, and the reality is that the subsurface smoldering event is still nowhere near the triggers we originally established with the state, we recognized a while ago that putting in an isolation barrier would provide this community with peace of mind. So we said, let's do that, let's put it in. We recently entered into an agreement with the EPA on pre-construction work for the barrier, and we are already fast at work on a draft plan. As we've said all along, we're committed to the rapid construction of an isolation barrier as soon as a plan has been approved by regulatory authorities. With respect to Westlake landfill, this community has been waiting for a remedy for far too long. To be clear, we did not create this challenge. We did not put the radiological materials in Westlake landfill. We simply acquired the property as part of a much broader acquisition. And like everyone in this room, we want certainty for Westlake. Frankly, we believe this community deserves certainty. There's been 30 years of testing, analysis, and public involvement, as you know. The EPA selected a final cleanup plan in 2008. In 2009, the EPA put its cleanup on hold in order to conduct years more testing. Those supplemental tests, as we all know, are ongoing. But when you look to the science, to all available data, it is clear that Westlake landfill continues to be safe. After extensive testing and monitoring, the EPA and MDNR have said that there are no public health or safety risks for individuals working at or living in the vicinity of the site. So what we have is a situation where prolonged delays have exacerbated public uncertainty, understandably resulting in significant public frustration and concerns. This brings me to FUSRAP. As we've said, we are willing to work with any agencies that will help to get a remedy for Westlake landfill back on track. The irony, however, is that's not what FUSRAP actually accomplishes. Transfer to FUSRAP, and I agree with Ed on this, it hits the redo button. It restarts. But what that also means is additional studies, review, and investigation, all of which have already been completed. FUSRAP means more delays. It means more public uncertainty for a community that's already endured years of delay and years of uncertainty. As this council is aware, FUSRAP is a separate program established by Congress and run by the Corps. It's under EPA direction as well as EPA standards, and it is dependent upon federal appropriations, taxpayer dollars. Those taxpayer dollars would go to fund the cleanup, whereas under EPA control, the potentially responsible parties, the PRPs, pay for the cleanup. In the past few years, Congress has funded the FUSRAP program at roughly $100 million. However, the program has more than 24 pending projects currently, which would likely go ahead of Westlake landfill if the site were transferred by Congress in law into the program. One of those projects is estimated to cost more than $500 million, or 5 times the current funding level for the entire FUSRAP program. To be clear, FUSRAP as a program has its place. It has worked at 3 St. Louis sites with much higher risk of public exposure than Westlake. I'm talking about sites that had contaminated soil at ground surface level, sites that are in public areas such as office buildings, parks, even baseball fields. Because of those higher risks, most of those soils have been or are in the process of being excavated. But Westlake is different. Westlake is an inaccessible former landfill. It contains trash, and as evidence shows, the radiological material in Westlake is leached barium sulfate, low-level material. The 3 FUSRAP sites in greater St. Louis were not landfills. They contained higher-level radiological material. They had a much greater risk of public exposure than at Westlake. Simply, the Corps is cleaning up much more harmful material at these other sites. And in some cases, the Corps leaves a significant amount of the material in place at locations that are not accessible to the general public. I should also point out that many sites with radioactive contamination are successfully remediated without placement into the FUSRAP program, such as Weldon Springs, which was successfully remediated by the Department of Energy and the EPA. I would submit that if Corps involvement at Westlake landfill is the goal, the EPA has already entered into an agreement for the Corps to provide technical assistance on the construction of an isolation barrier. I want to thank the council for the opportunity to offer a different perspective on FUSRAP. As one of the PRPs at Westlake, we are an industry leader in waste and recycling services. That includes landfill management. We own and operate more than 200 landfills around the country. Some of these landfills are part of or are associated with the Superfund program in one way or another. We know what successful remediation looks like. I want to say to everyone in this room that we are completely sympathetic to the community concerns that we've heard in recent years and the concerns that we're hearing again tonight. While people might not realize it today, I believe one day soon, this community will recognize that it was fortunate that a company like Republic was one of the PRPs at Westlake, a company with the expertise, the experience, and the capabilities to bring successful remediation to the Westlake landfill. Ultimately, we want what you want. That is the safest and the best long-term solution for this community. So I thank you again for the opportunity to speak and join you here, and look forward to answering any questions a little later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Naki. We appreciate it. If you would stay around after we hear everybody, we're going to ask any questions that may have come up.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Dawn Chapman. Dawn is she's a co-founder of Just Moms STL.
Hi, my name is Dawn Chapman, and I really am just a mom. I live 2.06 miles south of Westlake and Bridgeton landfills. I really want to thank you for doing this tonight. I think this is the first time that we've ever had a work meeting where all the groups have been in the same room together, and I think that's really neat. I wish Bridgeton could have done it, but I'm thankful that you guys chose to be the first city to do that. I think that's very helpful.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
I want to start out by saying that as far as I represent the community, we all live there. We have meetings once a month. We're very frustrated, and it's not just with the lack of movement on Westlake at this point. I think it is very sad, and everybody will agree that it's been there for 40 years and nothing's been done with it. But the most important thing is that we want scientific data. We want new data and a new set of eyes on Westlake. There have been some mistakes made, some big ones. For instance, Mr. Naki just mentioned that FUSRAP in all of their sites in North County, that they're handling very dangerous materials, significantly more dangerous than Westlake. The very interesting thing is, back to Ed Smith's presentation, the soil. When Westlake was moved from Laddie, and the top layer of soil was scraped and dumped at Westlake, the Army Corps of Engineers came in and they remediated Laddie Avenue. It's clean now. And they've been very forthcoming with their soil samples and what they found. The evidence has always said, all these documents say, the leach barium sulfate was diluted with clean fill soil, clean fill dirt. And then it was changed a year ago. EPA said, well, yeah, you know, you're right, there may have been some contaminants in it. The interesting thing is, if you look at what they found in the Laddie Avenue soil, if you look at what they found underneath Westlake landfill, you will see that it was just the opposite. That soil was actually diluted with the barium sulfate. What was in the soil, what they found, was so much worse than anything that could be found in the barium sulfate, and it was much more water soluble. Not only that, the particle size was so much smaller. When they went back and investigated the thorium-230 particle, which is just as dangerous as plutonium, it was so small. St. Louis not only has the largest amount of thorium-230 in Westlake, but we have the smallest particle. They underestimated how far it would travel in the wind. So the soil that's at Westlake landfill is very, very dangerous. That is why with the Dr. Chris report, and again, the entire community has read this report. I'm not a scientist, I'm just a mom. I can't tell you whether it's true or not, but I think after a year, EPA needs to come back and comment on it. When we say we want FUSRAP, it's not because we want removal. The truth is, I don't know if it can be removed. I really don't. And I think that everyone in this room, if given a magic wand, you'd want it gone if it could be. But you're all logical and you know that that might not be the case. What we're asking is for the experts who have actually cleaned up this material all across St. Louis to come in and take a look at Westlake. You know, Mr. Naki talks about starting from scratch. I don't think that's the case, and I'll tell you why. There's been enough push now for the past year with FUSRAP they know that this could be theirs at any moment. They know that at any moment, they could be given Westlake landfill. They've been going over the same documents we've been going over. They've been looking at the Dr. Chris report. They have looked at the feasibility studies. They're looking at the groundwater data. They are well prepared, I believe, should this site be transferred to them. And I'll tell you what, if they go in there and they decide that there needs to be more testing, I think with good reason. You don't want to come up with a solution for this site without adequate data to back it up. The 2008 record of decision was just for a cap, an earthen barrier over the top of it. For us, when Republic Services came back with their report that stated that if the fire hit the radioactive waste, nothing would happen, we waited for 2 months. EPA got their own scientists involved who said that's completely false. The two should never be allowed to meet. Department of Health and Senior Services just put out a report saying the same thing, and so did fire expert Todd Thalhammer, who's nationally recognized with dealing with subsurface landfill fires. What's happening is now this community is seeing 3 independent opinions going against the opinion of Republic Services expert, EMSI, who is their engineering firm, who has had this site since 1995. All we want as a community is to get that fresh set of eyes on it. And while that may take a little bit more time, I think in the interest of safety, I think it's worth it. We are very excited about this barrier, and we do appreciate Republic coming forward with the barrier. You know, that is something that this community has been asking for, a way that the two could be separated. We would like to have some more information on that as soon as it's available to see what the plan is. But in the meantime, they're finding new pockets of radioactivity further south. And again, that just goes to show that this site has never been properly characterized. After 40 years, they're finding new locations of this closer to the fire. So again, our argument for FUSRAP, for us, it's kind of like going and seeing a cancer doctor. Forgive me for saying the C word, but if you have a brain tumor, you're going to find the surgeon that is successful in removing that specific tumor. And if that surgeon who's had majority of success stories tells you, I'm sorry, it can't be removed, well, then you know that you have sought the input of the expert. So that's what we're asking for as a community.
Thank you, Don. Very well spoken. Again, if you could stay around, there may be questions at the end. Next, we have Matt Lavanchi, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, with Pattonville Fire Protection District.
Well, I'm going to first start off with saying that it's not the Pattonville Fire District's prerogative to weigh in on any political measure that's going to take place, especially in St. Charles County, since we're in St. Louis County. I was asked to be here tonight to speak to the council in case there were any questions, and I don't want to take up your time giving you my personal opinion of this when the Pattonville Fire District's objective is to stay neutral on the subject when it comes to policy, whether it be this county or any other. I can tell you that we have, as a fire district, have adopted a similar resolution to the movement of the oversight from the EPA to the Army Corps of Engineers FUSRAP program based on information that's already been presented, so I'm not going to rehash that. Our biggest concern is that there's information and data that's available that dictates or shows common sense logic that there have been documents that have been overlooked or documents that were downplayed as part of the record of decision from the EPA. There's also documents that show that there are other materials other than what's reported in the EPA's record of decision. In a meeting I had with Paul Rosasco just last week, who is EMSI engineer, who is the chief engineer for Republic Services, he confirmed that that dirt that Dawn was talking about also had other materials in it. However, the EPA's report and EMSI's report do not take those other materials into consideration when they evaluate the subsurface smoldering event and its correlation and what would happen if that SSE hit the radioactive area of OU1. So if that gives you any information where we stand, that's why we're on board with the FUSRAP program. Other than that, I'd be happy to answer any questions from a first responder perspective. But like I said, it's not our prerogative to get involved in the politics of your county.
Do you want to take just a few moments and talk about what kind of first response would be if?
Sure, and
event
we
like
have been part of St. Louis County's response program and planning sessions, along with members of your staff here at St. Charles County. It's been a joint effort to kind of identify what potential emergencies would arise in the event that not only that the SSE encountered a radiological patch of material, but if something were to happen that could be considered a disaster or a potential disaster in any type of fire or smoke plume, radiological plume, any type of material leaving that site. That's been ongoing for a number of months now, and I believe we're to the point where we're close to having a final document. Our input has been from the first responder standpoint of what roles we would portray in the immediate initial response. Obviously, if something were to happen at this landfill, it would be a response that would be on the scale of a regional response. You know, St. Charles County assets would be utilized, as well as many number of St. Louis County assets. Also the regional hazardous materials response teams, which I happen to be the commander of with St. Louis County. Very good friends and have a good working relationship with Chief Daly with St. Charles City Fire Department, who's the commander of the St. Charles County hazardous materials response team. So we've been actively looking at what different types of scenarios we have. We've also been involved with working with the landfill management, with helping them to develop an incident management plan, which in turn, once that's finalized, we will come back with an incident action plan for the first responders. And whether or not that includes evacuation, or if it's deemed that sheltering in place is more is the safer route. But some of those things, that's what we're evaluating and what we will potentially be responding to. But it has taken, a large number of people with the power to put those groups together. That's something that the Pattonville Fire District has been calling on for the last 2 years since we've been involved with it. So we are making steps in the right direction, but as many of you know, the progress or steps of progress are slow sometimes, and bureaucracy and things like that tend to slow things down because there are two very different opinions on this subject matter. So ours is purely the protection and the safety provided to not only the Bridgeton community and the Pattonville Fire District, but anybody downwind of this event should it occur.
Thank you, we appreciate
I
it.
have a question.
Yeah, Joe.
In a worst-case scenario, can you give me an idea of the radius of the affected area that you anticipate?
Right, if I had a crystal ball, I'd love to tell you that. For our planning measures, we originally started at 1 mile when work began last summer. The 1 mile radius was an issue, and then with our joint efforts with both counties, we have identified an area of 2 miles in diameter. And, depending on what the incident is, that radius could go up or down. The big key factor is going to be the prevailing wind at the time, because all of this is going to be driven by, the direction of the wind, the speed of the wind, things like that. So we have looked into modeling, plume modeling, which is also something that we feel is very important in understanding the correct ways to do that, not just from a smoke plume, but also possibly a radiological plume. And obviously downwind is going to have a bigger area of evacuation should we go that way than what it would be upwind. So just to say that there's a 2 mile circle drawn around the landfill wouldn't actually be accurate to say. But it's something that the computer models would assist us in determining.
All right. Thank you, I appreciate it. If you wouldn't mind just hanging
Sure.
around for just a little bit longer, we appreciate your time. Let's do this, if it's all right with everybody else. Let's go back in reverse order again, or in the same order, that is, and did anybody have any questions that they would like to address to Ed Smith from the... Mr. Brazel?
Mr. Smith, if the smoldering, at what rate is it smoldering, and if it does hit the radioactivity or radioactive waste, what does it become, an airborne problem or a groundwater problem, or?
Well, that's a lot to answer. It's already a groundwater problem. There's for radium at least, there's a drinking water level called the maximum contaminant level. That's at 5 picocuries per liter. When the EPA made its record of decision in 2008, only 4 wells showed an exceedance above 5 picocuries per liter. Now, the most recent groundwater results were between 15 to 25 exceedances above that maximum contaminant level, and a lot of them are much higher, so in between 15 and 25 versus the highest one of 6.33 before EPA made that decision. So there's no liner separating the radioactive material from the groundwater. So
when you're speaking about, you're talking about the aquifer, like the water, so it actually gets into
the groundwater,
Yeah.
right? So there are other issues with the groundwater related to seismic vulnerabilities, detailed by Dr. Chris. But related to the smoldering fire, again, like Matt said, there's no crystal ball. It would depend on if it stayed submerged or if there was an actual flame involved. One thing that was identified in the DNR report, the EPA's report, and DHSS, or at least in a couple of them, was that there's no leachate collection system where the radioactive waste is at this landfill. The record of decision doesn't call for a leachate collection system. This is what collects all the liquids in the landfill because they're pretty toxic, because all the stuff that's there. So if a smoldering fire were to reach the radioactive material, there is no suction system over there to suck out that and try and prevent it from getting in the groundwater. This is in the geomorphic floodplain of the Missouri River, and it's 8 river miles upstream from the American water intake. The EPA has made perfectly clear, and I have no reason to contradict this statement, that there are no drinking water wells in the vicinity of the landfill. They did some off-site testing upstream from the landfill and didn't find anything of concern, so that's good news. But the radioactivity is going to increase for the next 9,000 years because of the chemical conversions of this radioactive material during the weapons production. So the radium is going to literally take 9,000 years to get almost 100 times more radioactive than it is now before it starts to decay through the normal half-life process. So you have a long-term radiological threat here with no leachate system in the groundwater in the floodplain of the Missouri River, which floods. The Earth City levee was one of the few that didn't get breached in 1993. And with Chesterfield being underwater in '93 and the rebuilding of the Monarch levee bigger and better than ever, we could expect probably some more issues downstream than upstream next time there's a big flood. I don't know if that answered your question. There's a lot of questions in there, concerns.
It should be noted too that this landfill is a former quarry. There's a good
Correct.
article in the paper. And what they quarry around here primarily is limestone, and the limestone's fractured and cracked. Well, since that quarry is turned into a landfill, there was no liner put in, so anything that's in that quarry eventually is going to get into the water supply. My family, like a lot of families in this county, get their water from private wells. And even out in Little St. Paul, where I come from, it's only about 15 miles as a crow flies to that site. And when we put our first well in St. Paul, I was a point man for the city, along with Mr. Bamer, for that well. And water does migrate inside those aquifers. And 9,000 years is a lot of time. And that's what I was more concerned about than anything when I started this, is what's going to happen to our water that people in my area, in my district, rely on to drink. when this stuff does get into the limestone and into the water and migrate around. And folks said, well, you know, this shouldn't be a St. Charles County issue, but, you know, if you look at the science around this, you know, the gentleman from Pattonville was pretty clear. You know, it could be a mile, could be 2 miles, could be 3 miles. That thing's 2 miles away from downtown St. Charles, or about 1 mile from downtown St. Charles. 2 miles puts you to Fifth Street, okay? So this has a potential to be negatively adverse, you know, for our residents. So I think it's important for our county for that reason. I was disappointed that the EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers did not come tonight. 3 people from the EPA spoke with me in depth about it, and the gentleman from the Corps of Engineers, we were under the impression he was going to come. But I do believe that the EPA made the right decision in the fact that they hired the Corps of Engineers as a consultant and a builder for this barrier, okay? And I think they did that because they didn't have the level of expertise that was needed to handle radioactivity. EPA, with the fellow from the Corps of Engineers said, the EPA is really good at Superfund sites. They know how to handle leachate and all the other nasty stuff that's in the non-radioactive burning part of the landfill. But they don't have that nuclear experience, and that's why they need the Army Corps of Engineers. And when I heard that from the EPA, I heard that from the Corps of Engineers. So I think St. Louis City, St. Louis County, our congressional delegation are on the right page. I mean, the more that comes to the cleanup effort, the better in most instances.
Yeah, I'll just leave with our remaining concern about the isolation barrier is that so far the Environmental Protection Agency, it's been noted, has found new areas of radioactive material it had not previously identified. There's remaining concern because EPA has not tested between where a proposed isolation barrier will be and the smoldering fire. There are no plans at this time to test in between there. So that's a concern we're trying to have addressed and something I thought should be on your radar.
Thank you, appreciate that. Next, we'll have any questions that we'd like to direct to Russ Naki from Republic. Does anybody have any questions from the council? Mr. Cronin?
What happens when you guys start running that dozer for that isolation barrier? What happens if you hit new pockets of radioactivity? I mean, where do we go from there? Or is that something the Corps and the EPA will have to work out?
Sir, so as I mentioned, we're in the process of working actively on a draft work plan that we'll submit to the EPA as part of our pre-construction work agreement. That agreement establishes what the work plan really should involve. Once we submit that plan, we expect the EPA to respond back with whatever input they might have, and we'll go from there. I don't feel that it'd be appropriate for me to speak on behalf of the EPA other than to say that, like us, they're completely committed to public safety and safety at the site. So these types of issues will have been thought through and addressed in a final work plan, and once a work plan is approved, we'll, as I said, we're committed to rapid construction of a barrier as soon as it's approved.
Do you have a time frame when that barrier what do you estimate will start the construction of the barrier?
Sir, if I could give you that, I would. It'd be premature for me to speculate. Like I say, in the next 30 days or so, less than that now, we'll have submitted our pre-construction work, our draft work plan as part of that agreement. The EPA will evaluate it. We expect that they'll have some feedback, at which point in time, hopefully we'll be on the same page and we can work with the Corps. Obviously, the Corps is going to be involved and we can get going on a construction plan. I'm happy to keep you informed, and when I have a timetable, I'll be happy to provide it.
If you would, please.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else have any other questions for Mr. Naki? Okay. Don Chapman, thank you for attending. We certainly appreciate your efforts. Does anybody have any questions for Don? Okay. And then any other questions for Matt from Pattonville? Seeing none?
I'd like to have some questions for Matt if he would take that badge off and speak as a private citizen.
I wish I could, but I'm here as a representative of fire.
I understand that.
Well said, Matt, well said.
All right, I appreciate everyone's time tonight. It certainly is a sensitive issue, and it's been there for 40 years. I gotta say, just living less than and 3 miles from it, I had no idea of the magnitude of the hazardous materials that were there. So I certainly appreciate everyone coming tonight. Joe, I want to personally thank you for bringing it to our attention. It's certainly something we need to be more aware of, so thank you for that.
I'd like to explain the changes to substitute resolutions, and we've got a couple
Yep,
minutes left.
no, that's fine.
Essentially, the resolution that was before the council that we started last year, actually, there was a lot of objection to it because I basically plagiarized Mr. English, okay, I'll admit to it, in stating that we wanted to move this waste away from people and water, okay? I'm not certain that's the best alternative, okay, and I don't think anyone is yet because there's not been enough study done. So after some objections from folks within the state of Missouri about that portion, I removed that entire sentence. So essentially, the current resolution just asks for the Army Corps of Engineers FUSRAP program to come in and take a second look at this situation. And then it's the same thing, our congressional delegation is asking Congress, same thing the city of St. Louis County, Pattonville Fire, and a host of other people are asking. Let's get some more people involved that have specific experience dealing with radioactivity. Department of Energy did clean up Weldon Springs, but then Department of Energy handed off the responsibility to FUSRAP. So essentially, the people that did Weldon Springs are basically, now it's a federal entity that's now is in charge of FUSRAP. So I think they did a good job at Weldon Springs, if everybody's familiar with that issue. They did a lot of study, they did a good job cleaning it up and storing it, and I think essentially the federal government, Department of Energy and/or Army Corps of Engineers have got the experience dealing with the nuclear waste. I think that's also, my discussions with the EPA echoed that same amount. I think it's pretty evident when the EPA hires the Army Corps of Engineers to come in and work and design on a barrier, that they're acknowledging the fact that the Corps of Engineers has more expertise. So essentially, all we're asking to do is ask Congress to provide the funding to get the Army Corps and Engineers involved in a greater detail. And that's the same thing that our congressmen are asking for too.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions about the resolution? Seeing none, thank you. Appreciate that. And look at that, we're right on track. Again, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you to everyone for
you.
attendance tonight. We certainly appreciate your time and your expertise on this subject.
Your time, I can use it, Russ, real quick.
Yes. What- Hey, Joe, we're gonna take a 5-minute and then we'll get started at 6:05.
Thank the council for letting us entertain this idea, or this bill. What it was is about, 6 weeks ago, there was a group of folks that put on it was a seminar, so to speak, on red light cameras. I don't remember who the group was, but it was at St. Peter City Hall. And I went to that seminar, and Dan wasn't there, but Matt was there. And I'll let these guys introduce themselves here in a minute, so you know why they're here. And I was intrigued by all the information. It was unbelievable. And I sent you guys some of the packets. It's a lot of reading, but it's good reading. It talks about the different traffic companies on the different, the lawsuits and all the different stuff, and privatizing the law with traffic, and there's all kinds of reasons why this is a bad idea. But the most important thing is pulling the statistics on the injury accidents. I pulled statistics, and I sent you guys the traffic accidents. I had Donna ask St. Peter's on what, I said, send us 2 years of all the red light cameras, prior to 2 years of the red light camera, and 2 years after the red light cameras. And you guys got this in your packet, but if you look at the numbers, it was an increase of about 30% in accidents and 30% in injuries. And the reason is, and these guys will be able to explain this, the reason is you get rear-end collisions because people are slamming on their brakes and they don't want to get the ticket, they don't want to pay for the ticket, and it interferes with the proper flow of traffic. So the main and primary reason is they are not safe. And there's a Kansas City study that I sent you guys. It was done by the Kansas City Police Department, and it has streets, intersections, everything, and it talks about how it causes more accidents. I have study after study. I mean, we have a lot of stuff that I sent you guys. It's almost too much stuff, but one after the other says that, that red light cameras cause accidents. Now, you will have other people who will argue against that, but these guys will explain that when you see those are non-published, and they're all either sponsored or are supported by the traffic camera providers. So anyway, I think that this issue would be a good ballot issue for the charter, and it would state, and this has been done in 34 different communities. It's passed overwhelmingly in 33 communities. None in Missouri, but throughout the country they've done this. And the reason it didn't pass in the 34th community is because the police department was going door to door knocking on the residents' doors saying that they'll be laying people off at the police department and all this other nonsense. But anyway, Dan, you can introduce yourself and.
Hi, I'm Dan Hyatt. I'm the state representative for the National Motorist Association. They were initially formed and became known for ending the national 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. We are a grassroots organization to get fair traffic enforcement, good traffic engineering, and we try and look out for the motorists. By profession, I'm a computer engineer. I've been closely researching photo enforcement and some of the other, I call them troll booths or revenue schemes by the cities using traffic enforcement to raise revenue. And so I consider myself a lay expert on photo red lights, and I've identified many defects with the claims of the red light camera companies.
Okay.
My name is Matt Hay.
It's picking you up real, it's
It
picking
is?
it up well.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. My name is Matt Hay. I'm a former councilman from the city of Arnold, 2008 to 2010. I also started a group called Wrong on Red. We have a website called wrongonred.com. I have been interested in the photo enforcement issue and kind of the public policy issues surrounding it, as well as the technical and health and safety issues since about 2009. The cameras came into the state of Missouri and Arnold in 2005. So kind of during my stint as a councilman, I think some of the questions that I asked the police chief and had to redefine what the word is, or in that case, what an accident was. Because believe it or not, before the red light cameras and after the red light cameras, the definition of an accident changed. Funny how that is. So I've got some copious knowledge of a lot of the issues, as well as I've assisted with some of the cases that have gone through the appellate courts. By day, I'm a contract negotiator for a Fortune 500 firm. I negotiate contracts with various stock exchanges.
What some of the issues are is if, I know that some of the cities have put pressure on, or they will, and then you'll probably get pressure from, as Donna, do you guys know they're doing robocalls already? Did you hear that? The ASTM, or American Traffic Standards, or whoever may be doing it, it's gonna be just like the drug companies when we did the pseudo-federal bill. So they're already doing robocalls. If you read this information, like the pitfalls of privatized traffic law enforcement deals, you need to read some of this stuff. And it talks about, the money that's involved here. So they'll run a campaign like in all these cities that were sued by American Traffic Standards. If you read them, it's one after the other. They try to get out of contracts and the problems it causes for the cities. Even if it goes to a vote of the people, then the traffic and photo companies file lawsuits after it even goes to the vote of the people. I know that doesn't involve us because we don't have a contract. However, this creates a lot of problems for the citizens in the county. And once again, it's absolutely not proven to be safe in any fashion. Now, they'll come in here and they'll show you photos of cars running red lights and stuff like that, and give you the wow factor. But the reality is, by just our own very own, this is sent by a sergeant out of St. Peter's Police Department, there was an increase 30%. I don't care how you twist the numbers, but this is the data right here. And if you could go to each and every one, Kansas City, Missouri, same thing. You guys could say data after data after data where it says that it increases injuries and accidents.
The city of Ellisville saw a number of 24%. They actually just voted to cancel their contract last month.
Well, when you were, Arnold was that Richardson and Vogel,
Richardson and Vogel, we saw according to the Missouri State Highway Patrol Accident Recording System, which is maintained by the Highway Patrol, it's called the STARS database, we saw a 370% increase in collisions at the intersection, or at the off-ramp there at Highway 55 and the Richardson Vogel, which is pretty sizable. We're not talking one accident going to two. I think we're talking about like 40 going to 87 or 89. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I believe they were in your packet from the numbers that were reported by the Highway Patrol. And you got about 55 lines of the before and after statistics from those red light camera installed intersections that they had data on for 2 years prior to the installation, and then as much data as they had post-installation.
Dan, have you and Matt had an opportunity yet to go to, right now, the only community in St. Charles County that has these is St. Peter's. Have you approached them and their aldermanic board and mayor about removing them?
I have not.
I've not had any discussion on it.
Okay.
I have gone to other cities, and the approach is they listen politely, and they go ahead and authorize more photo red lights.
Okay.
Mike, any questions for these guys, or?
The only other question I have is if you're not an advocate for red lights, what about other crime uses for cameras? You don't advocate that either, or? Because like right here in St. Charles, we're looking at using cameras to curb crime.
Yeah.
Look, there's a lot of problems with photo enforcement that have nothing to do with surveillance cameras.
Okay.
And
I just wanted to clear that up to see if there's
And
a division.
I'm not completely opposed to if you get a driver going through a red light, 10 seconds red, broadsiding somebody, using the picture to convict them and to get the other party their compensation. I have a problem with rigging the red lights, and I could go into depth, rigging the red lights to maximize violations. Most of the violations are under a quarter of a second, yet the manufacturers of the red lights themselves say that they don't know whether it's actually red or not until a third of a second. So if the manufacturer doesn't know that it's red, how can they certify in court? They don't certify in court that it's red. But the serious collisions don't start until, according to the National Red Light Violation Handbook, until 2 to 4 seconds red, which is a full magnitude longer.
And if you don't mind my quick answer to that, I think the main difference between, we're talking these third-party operated vendor systems versus a proprietary surveillance system. In fact, in Ellisville, that was the claim of the camera vendor was, well, accidents might have increased, but we've stopped 40 crimes, we've helped you guys solve 40 crimes with our surveillance footage. Well, that's good, put in a surveillance camera. The real issue with these third-party data vendors are, most of these systems, if not all of them nowadays, and I would have thought it was black helicopter stuff 3 years ago, have a technology called ALPR built into them. It's automated license plate recognition software. This software and these systems, contrary, and a lot of folks don't realize this, but the systems don't just operate when they detect a possible violation and then the video rolls for 10 seconds and you take the still digital photos. The video component of the system actually runs 24/7, 365, runs constantly. So when they send you these snippets on this ticket and you go to the website, it's just 10 seconds that they've spliced out of the larger footage they have. The issue is the ALPR technology in some of these systems, and we've seen in the case of a company called Vigilant Video, they're selling access to the database to the Department of Homeland Security. That just came out about 3 weeks ago. What they have the capability to do is capture the metadata for every plate that goes through that intersection, whether they've run the red light or not. With that license plate information, they also have unfettered access into the Missouri Department of Revenue Vehicles Registration Database. You can then take the license plate information, correlate it to a vehicle, you can correlate that to an owner, you can contextualize that metadata, and data is what I do for a living, but you can contextualize that metadata, and it is a gold mine that you can sell to third party. I mean, in a very altruistic case, a third-party marketing firm that wants to do target marketing for any demographic that, frequents a given area with an income over $75,000, or for more nefarious purposes, like what the company Vigilant Video is doing, and they're the company that operates a lot of the car-mounted ALPR scanners, taking that data, putting it into a database, and then selling it to Homeland Security for a couple $100,000 a year. Now, I guess the issue between the two, obviously, is a security system is, proprietary in that it would be used by the police department versus these third-party systems that are used ultimately by the police department, but the data flows through so many hands, and there's so many places for private personal data. I mean, you can create a heat map composite of where people are going. To take this data and to hold it, possibly sell it, nobody knows what's going on with it. And I think that's the really big difference, because surveillance cameras, obviously don't have that built into them.
In short, he's saying private party with zero regulation has extreme surveillance video that they can sell to anybody, public or private, and remember, there's no regulation on it, and they're doing it to, one more thing with the red light collision problem. According to the state of Missouri, there is not a problem with red light collisions because it does not make the top 10 of their list to the U.S. Department of Transportation on causes of major accidents. It does not make the list. If you're writing tens of thousands of citations a year, then I would think that it would make the list of the top 10 problems.
Okay, Mr. Cronin and then Mr. Elam.
I got it.
Steve, you're third. One second, Steve, 1 minute, 1 moment. Mr. Cronin, you have the floor. Steve, you're third. I was pointing to Mr. Elam.
That's okay, boss. I'm sorry. Okay. I've read this report that Mr. Brazel had sent to us, and I skimmed it as fast as I could this morning. But I do have one specific question here. It says in here, local contracting for automated traffic enforcement systems may sometimes be a useful tool for keeping drivers and pedestrians safe. Okay? Would you agree to that? Are there instances where that is true? Okay? And if so, is it possible if we can get the data from St. Peter's, okay, to you, okay, would you be willing to look at their timing of those lights and their utilization of these lights to see if that was really an egregious way to raise more money for their city, or what they claim is it is a useful system for keeping drivers and pedestrians safe, like it's reported in this? What's your opinion of that?
My answer to that is, for a safety system that would write violations would be very non-profitable. As I mentioned earlier, most of the violations are either right turns on red where they slow down and go, and it's the smallest percentage of causes of accidents of any, and those are minor accidents. And the other is the first quarter second where it's we don't know if it's red yet, so officially it's not red. Those are not the cause of accidents. That's where they're writing all the violations. The National Engineering Standard, which is the red light violation handbook, says that the serious accidents don't start until 2 seconds red, and most of the accidents don't occur until 4 seconds red. And if they did not write a single violation until 2 seconds red and not on right turns, then my arguments would not be valid.
Well, they have, the reason I'm asking you this is, according to the mayor, they wrote 30 tickets last month. They've got 6 different intersections, and all of these are high-traffic intersections. He's telling me they're being very judicious who gets a ticket and does not. If they're only writing an average of 5 per intersection, maybe they're doing the right thing by this. But I don't think, I'd like to see someone who has experienced that look at those numbers.
Well, I just want to caution you on St. Peter's. They've had quite a few iterations of their ordinance due to the various court cases that have come down, and I believe this latest iteration, and basically the appellate courts have held as much, is that the systems themselves are just a mechanism to prosecute a violation, not a violation in and of themselves. So I believe St. Peter's now has to have the additional step of identifying who the actual driver is, because they've got a front-facing camera system. So they have to actually identify the driver, whereas they don't use rebuttable presumption, which, if you're not familiar with it, is basically just assuming that because you're registered on the vehicle, even though the vehicle may be entitled to a trust or to a joint party, that therefore you're liable for the actions of said inanimate object. They would just issue you a ticket. So what I'm saying is, with St. Peter's is, we've found statistically, when you introduce a component, like in Arizona, they passed a state law that requires identification of the actual operator of the vehicle. You know, you can't just assume it's the driver. Well, once that happens, the citation rates go down 80 to 85%, because in most cases it becomes impossible to do. So I would just caution you with St. Peter's, that if you're using data since, I'm trying to think when they amended their ordinance, I believe it was in February of this year, I think you would probably need to take a step back and see what those citation rates were through probably the latter half of 2013.
Well, right now though, currently, and you guys know this, is I don't know if it's currently, but in the past, is if they would issue the ticket to the person who registered the vehicle. So you would get that ticket in the mail, $110 fine, and then you would see the picture that it was possibly the daughter driving, and the daughter had made a right-hand turn on red at the community college, okay? And then the mother of that parent refuses to send in $110 because of the principal, and has to go sit in court for 3 hours on a Tuesday night and go up to the judge and say, this is clearly not me, and they have dismissed the cases. But the fact that you're getting a ticket without even being in the vehicle, to me, it's also got some constitution issues as well. So most people are just gonna pay the fine, and that, it's kind of like they set it at a mark where, well, for 2 or 3 hours, I'm gonna go ahead and pay $110. Well, it's just, to me, it's there's right and wrong, and this is wrong.
Also, if I may comment to your believing that St. Peter's will, in a unregulated market, be very judicious. The cities in St. Louis County right next door have proven that in the market where the company is coaching them how to weasel around the law, they do things such as they send thousands of tickets to the city. The officers on the stand admit that they look at the data, accept the data verbatim, and then basically stamp it and it's approved. The police officers, they say that's oversight, but the police officers also say that they're given a very specific list of when they're allowed to dismiss a ticket, and very, very few of them have to do with the normal motorist. They have to do with funerals, city vehicles, such like that. So also with the ethical problems, Redflix is currently up on bribery charges, and I believe at the federal level.
13 different states. They were indicted for bribery, fraud, and corruption in Chicago, and the FBI investigation has now been branched out to 13 states with the possibility of probably including about 4 more.
Okay. Mr. Elam?
So you familiar with House Bill 1557?
I am.
Yes.
Intimately.
Okay, so I figured you might be. So I understand it passed the House.
Yes.
It's in the Senate.
Yes.
It got passed out of committee. I don't know if it's going to pass or not in the Senate. It won't or will?
It more than likely will end up being filibustered. It won't get much more time.
There you go. See, where were you when we were looking for a crystal ball earlier? You could have been very handy in the last discussion.
So is the word I'm hearing.
Okay, so how does that bill affect this bill? Like,
First off, Mike, can you give me a summary of that bill, because I'm not familiar with it, so.
well, he's
All right,
getting to
somebody-
be familiar as he's
All right, somebody give,
You're familiar with the Trojan horse. This is a Trojan horse bill that purports to regulate photo red lights. The problem is that the companies have come to the cities and said, I found a great way for you to make hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars a year. The bill pushes regulation of photo red lights onto the municipalities who are making their budgets on photo red light tickets. And that's the problem with Bill 1557. It's just a Trojan horse that eliminates state regulation of photo enforcement.
Right. What it would actually do is create a new violation under the law. Municipal violations are considered quasi-criminal in nature. They're civil, but they're considered quasi-criminal in that the person cited basically is entitled to due process under the court rules, whereas basically they inserted an amendment into the bill that deems it constitutional, a bit like how they deemed and passed the healthcare legislation in the U.S. House. But they just deemed it was passed. It didn't really, you can't just make something constitutional by saying it.
okay,
That said, I think the issue specifically to your question is how this relates to the legislation you're discussing now.
Yes.
Is that it really doesn't. And I say that in that a municipality cannot allow, or a political subdivision subservient to the state cannot allow that which the state denies. So if the state says, we're regulating K2, or, insert pseudoephedrine or what have you, you couldn't have a municipality say, well, that's okay, state of Missouri, we're gonna sell it anyway. However, what can happen is that a municipality can limit what the state allows. So what 1557 would do is it would codify red light cameras into the law and create a state statute, so there's not this, so we don't win in court anymore. We'll put it that way, because that's why we're winning in court. But what the St. Charles County ordinance would do specifically is say, well, that's fine, state of Missouri, you're fine to do whatever you'd like outside St. Charles County, but as a charter county, and I don't presume to be your legal counsel, so please have them double check anything I'm saying, but what that St. Charles County itself would have the ability as a charter county to enforce that within the county. You would just say, it would be just like if the state allowed K2, and you said, well, as a county, we're not going to allow we're not going to allow the sale.
I guess
Just like
what I'm
pseudoephedrine.
wanting to know here is, what's the difference between that bill and this bill? And what my understanding is that the 1557 caps a ticket, takes the points off of it, so there's not, because right now, because Judge House said you had to put points on it, correct? Because he said that then, right now, you get points to your license if you get a red light
Right, he
ticket.
said it's a mechanism for detecting a violation, not a violation in itself, so that basically anything that applied from being caught by a police officer basically would apply to the.
Right,
cameras.
because my original understanding was when St. Peter's had them before, they sent you the ticket, but you didn't get points to your license. And that's what St. Peter's originally had wanted with this, but
Right.
the court said, no, you have to put points to,
Well-
and there's no cap to what a ticket could be right now. There's no legislation that says a ticket can be whatever the municipality wants it to be, so that legislation was supposed to cap it. I know you're chomping at the bit to try to say something, so I'm trying to get a question out.
No problem, go ahead.
Hang with me for a little bit. So that's what I'm understanding.
Okay.
So what I'm trying to figure out is, if we do this now, and they pass this if we pass this on May 12th, they pass this at the end of session, did we just pass each other in the night by doing something, and we're gonna need to go back and rewrite this bill because the state just said it's blah, 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 and you put this in, so we need to adjust some things? Or are they taking care of some of this for us by what they're doing on a state level?
Let me fill that if I may.
Yeah, go for it.
St. Peter's, I believe, is a third-class city. They only have the power that's given to them by the state. This bill does not give them power. It strips the barriers away. That's why it's a Trojan horse. That allows the cities to grab power in a vacuum. Because you're a constitutional county, charter county, you have the ability to say, well, here's the rules in the county, and the city it won't be a power vacuum anymore. They won't be able to regulate photo enforcement into their checkbook.
Well, and it's really from that aspect no different than the pseudoephedrine regulations that were passed by St. Charles County. I mean, in that aspect. Now, the 1557 itself, though they package it as being restrictive, it's actually not. Most of these fees are set already by ordinance in these various municipalities, and they tend to be $95 to $100. If I remember right, 1557, unless they changed it, was either $130 or $150 cap. And basically what it does is because these municipalities, they call it Dillon's rule, but a non-charter entity only has as much authority as the state gives it. And basically, unless it's specifically delegated within state statute to that municipality for a third and fourth class city, the law is that you assume that they don't have that authority unless there is an authorizing statute. In this case, there is no authorizing statute for red light cameras. So that's why the courts, the appellate courts, have taken in the Supreme Court in denying some of the transfers that have been, requests that have been made to the appellate court, is that basically they wanted to say, we want to treat these different. So what the case law is basically at this point is, these are no different than if you're pulled over by a police officer. But in actuality, it's a lot different. Because the real question is, are you going to get pulled over by a police officer for a violation of 1/1000th of a second? No, the police officer is going to use his discretion and say, oh, that individual was, was safely transited the intersection before the one
Or
and
he
a half
wouldn't,
second.
he wouldn't see it. You couldn't
Well,
see it. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Whereas and 95% of these citations that are issued are within, basically a blink of an eye. I mean, it's something that any police officer would use their due diligence and discretion and say, this isn't a safety violation.
Oh, sorry. Steve had a question.
I was intrigued by the privacy aspect. I never really thought much about that. MoDOT takes a lot of pictures. How does MoDOT make sure that those don't fall in the hands of third parties so that they can be used for commercial purposes?
I am told those aren't stored on a central server, that basically they live stream and they're not retained, and that they don't have ALPR technology hooked into their video feed. Now, that's what MoDOT says. I can't confirm or deny that. I'm not going to dispute what they say. So, I mean, but at least then MoDOT too, being a government entity, is then bound as well by any privacy protections that the state may pass, because there's actually a privacy protection bill that I think it's Representative Corneo is looking at passing. I think he's the one that sponsored it, but it would basically restrict a lot of what the state can do. And I think that was directed because of the concealed carry issue they had with that breach from the Department of Revenue. But the issue is the bill is toothless when it comes to third-party data vendors. So even if they're acting as an agency for a state entity, they'll claim basically, and we've got a no agency clause in our agreement, so therefore we're not bound by the state statute that says you can't do this with Missourian data.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I got a question. I think this ALNR technology.
ALPR?
ALPR, that's used by our sheriff's department, I'm pretty certain. I think they've got a thing where if they're looking for a particular license plate, they've got, the police have automatic scanners where they're driving by and it goes through the computer. I think the real issue is the technology's there and it's useful, for law enforcement, but selling it to private companies.
What happens to the data? Because right now, more than likely, if say the St. Charles County Sheriff's Department's using it, is their system based on, they basically store it on a server on site and they do all the data processing? Or is it they send all the data to a third party who then archives it somewhere else? And it's when you send it to a third party and it leaves basically if you want to, nothing's really physical in the data world anymore, but it leaves St. Charles County Sheriff's Department's command and control. All of a sudden that data, I mean, you can have privacy agreements with the vendors. Most vendors don't jump to have privacy agreements, obviously, because that's their side business. It's just, I think the easiest way to equate it is Google. If you're familiar with the way Google, Google on the internet works, or an Android phone, by using the Google service, if you look down, very, very small print at the bottom, it basically says by using this service, you consent to basically Google using your demographic information, etc., which is one thing because you're doing it knowingly. But I think the other issue is then just driving down the street, I don't think creates that consent that, oh yes, my data can be sold to some third-party vendor just because I'm driving down the street minding my lawful business.
I think we need to make sure that that data is secure within the sheriff's department.
And I know in the city of Arnold, Vigilant Video, which is they were specifically cited in a report as selling access to Homeland Security to their database, was the company that approached the city of Arnold when I was right after I was councilman, and wanted to install those systems in our cars. So you may want to check and see who the third-party vendor is.
And there is a more nefarious problem with the data. California, which is my original home, had a problem where DMV was selling records to anybody with $5, and they sold the home address of an actress who died as a result of a stalker buying her home address from DMV. So is it theoretical that selling my data is bad? Absolutely not. A private company in control of data, unregulated, can be a very bad thing, especially traveling down the street, minding my own business.
Okay. So I think we're kind of drifting away from the core issue, and that still is the, should we have these in?
As you guys know, when I met with these folks first, I went to the seminar, and then we met afterwards, met with Harold and Drew, our other county attorney, and I was trying to make a case for doing a health law, because we could make it immediate and say that these cameras are a health risk to the, and I know that's a stretch, I get it, but through the charter we can have that ability. However, it was a stretch, and I get that. But I think that talking to some of the other fellow council members and other folks, I thought that by doing what we're doing here, if you read the data that I have in front of you, it's pretty clear what's going on here. It really is. And there's been a lot, you have Winsville pulled out of these cameras. They had them, they pulled them out because it was just a mess to the city. City of Washington, they pulled out of it because it was a mess, causing problems and havoc. Ellisville, Arnold.
Arnold's still in.
Are they still in?
They're on hiatus. All the systems in the state, as far as I know, other than St. Peter's and the city of St. Louis, it's operating under an injunction where they have to escrow every dollar they generate from the system until their court case goes through the appellate courts, are still operating, I believe.
I guess
It's my understanding that there's a number of lawsuits that are pending right now, and a lot of places kind of went dark for the moment, waiting to find out what the results of a lot of these lawsuits are going to be, and if those were going to settle themselves. You did say earlier that St. Peter's writes about 30 tickets a month. Is that about right? Joe, was that you who said that?
That's what Lynn Magano told me in a conversation.
That was my understanding. Do you know what percentage of that money they get to keep?
I don't know that, but I asked Lynn specifically, I said, Lynn, maybe we could find some common ground with this, because I think a lot of people think that you're overtly profiting your city from these fines. And he assured me that all of that money was being spent for veterans and senior citizens within the town of St. Peters.
It's my understanding that the city of St. Peters, do you need to take care of her?
Yeah.
It's all right, feel free. Okay. Don't let me stop you. But it was my understanding that the camera company that they work with wanted to put 24 intersections with the red light cameras, and the city of St. Peters agreed to do 11 of them. And they had no plans that I know of adding any others, at least not when I talked to the city of St. Peters, because when this came up, I talked to the mayor about it, and he said that was all that they were doing. That they're writing, from what I understand, on average, 30 to 45 tickets a month is all that they're writing on this. And the company who put the cameras in had expected them to write a whole lot more. But as the camera's been there, they've written less and less and less tickets. So they're averaging around one a day, from what I understand.
I think we've gotten to five or six cameras now.
5 or 6, they have 5 or 6
They
cameras?
have
Seven?
7, yeah. And I think Councilman Crone is right. The money all goes to senior and disabled adult transportation. That money's all earmarked. Like, it doesn't go to general fund, it goes to that. And they have the,
How much goes to the Red Flex?
how much goes to what?
Red Flex?
The company.
The company.
That's what I don't know.
50%?
I don't know. So it doesn't sound like, I mean, I just bring that up because you had mentioned earlier about, millions of dollars that these cities are doing, millions of dollars of grabs. It doesn't really sound like this is millions of dollars. I mean, if my math is good, then, which I'm from Arkansas, so it's probably not, but if my math is good, then they're probably only making about $2,500 a month.
50 grand was the number that Mr.
50 grand a year
Pagano
is what it came up
brought to me.
I think the 50 grand is total. It's not, that's not what the city gets.
I don't know.
I think, well, you figure if you do.
Right.
Yeah. So there's 3,000 a month if they write 30 tickets. So you can do the math from there and figure out that it's not a ton of money. So I don't think they're doing millions of dollars. And I just pointed that out because I don't want the impression to be that the city of St. Peters is getting rich off red light cameras. Fair?
Can I respond to those?
By all means.
When you're driving down the freeway and Missouri Highway Patrol is in the midst of your platoon, how many people are speeding?
I have no clue.
Nobody is speeding when they see Missouri Highway Patrol in your midst. When Missouri Highway Patrol is not there, people are doing 70, 75, 80 miles an hour. It's the same thing with this. When did they start getting 60 tickets a month? In the beginning? What are the numbers from day one? I know that St. Anne, according to Police Chief Fitch, was making $3.2 million a year. City of 15,000 people clearing $3.2 million a year on traffic violations. That's their thing on the freeway and their red light cameras and their speed camera. The city of Creve Coeur was writing thousands of tickets a month at $100 a piece, that's $100,000 a month or $1 million a year. ATS, I believe there's an ATS leadership here, got awards for making $50 million a year. That's an awful lot of tickets. And I was looking, they got no safety awards, but they got a lot of awards for making a lot of money. So how many tickets before the heat was on? Not how many tickets when the heat is on. I believe Redflix has a minimum amount that they get for each camera, and then after that, they split it. I haven't seen the contract, but that's what I understand the standard contract to be. And if they're not making a lot of money, they're not going to be doing these cameras. And once this passes and the heat's off, you can expect to see 1,000 tickets a month or more.
Well, and I think the other issue too is when we're talking about the context of St. Peter's, I think we need to know what ordinance and what numbers and what month we're talking about. And I say this, you know, being from the city of Arnold, we had one intersection that was issuing almost 800 citations a month. Sat like that for 5 years until myself and a state representative and a county councilman had a meeting with MoDOT and said, we need to look at this because there's 800 citations, 800 folks running this red light. There's a problem. It's not that folks are intentionally doing it. There's some larger issue. Well, doing some research, they found out that the yellow light was 1.7 seconds too short, below the federal minimum standard for the requirements of that intersection. So needless to say, once MoDOT came out and retimed that light properly, it went from 800 citations a month at a single intersection to about 8 or 9.
I would like,
Appreciate that.
I'd just like to see the facts on that though, Mike. 30 tickets, is that for one light, one specific light?
And is that after the driver identification portion of the ordinance went in? Are they taking 300, but they're only able to identify 30 of the individuals, and that's why they issue?
I think that we need to bring St. Peter's into this discussion as well. I'd like to see their data. I would like to hear from them. I made it a point to the previous work session to invite both sides of this because you want to hear both sides of an issue. And maybe St. Peter's is using this very judiciously, maybe they're not. But you know what, without their comment and without their data, we can't really tell that, okay? So, you know, I'd like to hear from those folks.
Did you, Mike, you invited Mayor Pagano, didn't you, or the council members?
I think they're in the middle of some legislation or some legal action, and they're not allowed to
Well, here's
speak on what's going on.
Here's my perspective on this, and you guys know my perspective, but it doesn't matter how much money they make. It doesn't matter where the money goes. It matters if you think it's right or you think it's wrong. And the fact is this county council has been the first to do certain things in the state of Missouri, and we've done things based on what we thought was right and what was wrong. And if you read all the data here, you're going to realize that what these red light cameras are just wrong. I mean, there's no other way of saying it unless you could also have the brotherhood of politicians and say, well, I got to see what the county or the city council is going to say. Well, if they get mad, so what? Because the fact is, we represent the constituents in St. Charles County, and we got to do what's best for them. And these are not best for them. And even if they could prove, which they cannot, that it was a safety issue, which it's not, then that's an argument. But it's not a safety issue. There's so many other reasons why this thing's wrong. So what I'm asking the county council to do is just let this go to a vote of the people. All you guys are doing, you're not voting in the meeting in 2 weeks. You're not going to vote nay or nay, a no vote or a yes vote. It's not saying that you're in favor of it or against it. It's just saying that I think this is very questionable what's going on here. I think that there are some big concerns. So yeah, I think that the people in St. Charles County should vote on it. And that's all we're asking to do.
But Joe, if you let the people in this county vote to repeal the speed limits on I-70 or get rid of the sales taxes, they probably would vote for that as well, let's face it. But, you know, the problem I have is this. I'll just tell you straight up while we're brought into it. We took an oath when we took this job, and it's to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and the Charter, And in that charter, it clearly states, nothing in this charter shall preempt the power of any local government to license, tax, regulate in accordance with the Constitution and applicable law, okay? I read that and I think, we're getting out of our nose and stuff we shouldn't. Okay?
Gentlemen, just a minute. Sure.
Yeah, I just have both of you have cited the fact that the courts think these red light cameras are bad. I mean, at least that's the trend. What I'd like to do is ask, Harold or someone from the administration, how they foresee the future. I mean, again, I'm not asking for a crystal ball, but if the tendency is for the courts to, in the next 6 months or a year, to say that red light cameras are illegal, then I'm not too sure we need to do anything. So, give me your opinion.
Harold, if you could, try to project as much as you can.
I think he just punted to Drew.
Okay. I didn't hear what he said, so thank you.
Yeah, and I've been following this now for a couple years, since before I came to work for St. Charles County, and I think you'll probably agree with me that there was a Nody Brook case, which was about 2 years ago, where the Eastern District basically upheld red light cameras. Then a year later, they enter another opinion that they reversed themselves, and they reversed the Nody Brook decision. What both the Eastern and Western District have done is ruled that the red light cameras, at least most of the ordinance, the way that they're written when points aren't assessed, are in conflict with state law, and have ruled that those type of red light camera ordinance to be unconstitutional and invalid. There's also a decision, and either at the Hazelwood case, I believe, where the judge also ruled the rebuttable presumption that you talked about earlier.
Bruner v. City of Arnold, and we expect the
Bruner
final
Arnold.
denial of the writ of transfer to come from the Supreme Court tomorrow.
So I misspoke. It was the Arnold case and not the Hazelwood case. But they also ruled that these rebuttable presumptions, which most of these ordinance use to assume that the registered vehicle owner was operating the vehicle at the time of the violation, they ruled that to be unconstitutional. The Western District, although hasn't ruled it unconstitutional, has seriously called into question the validity of those rebuttable presumptions.
They basically called it a money-making scam in the actual opinion.
And my opinion is I would think a year and a half from now, you're going to see the red light cameras gone the way of the dodo. I don't think they'll be around.
And that would be because of all the problems.
That's because of all the all the conflicts with state law, and that the rebuttal presumption be held unconstitutional. Unless there's some sort of legislation which would save them. I don't know the status of that or what the chances of that are being passed. But if the trend continues as it is now, it's only a matter of time before the red light cameras are held unconstitutional, I think, in most cities.
Yep.
They've been held unconstitutional in Arnold, Ellisville, Creve Coeur, Hazelwood,
And the list goes on.
Florissant, Kansas City, and there's a circuit opinion in the city of St. Louis saying that they're unconstitutional. As well as Judge House he hasn't ruled them unconstitutional, but he basically ruled dismissing charges against individual, and that case is on appeal in the Eastern District. And
Thank you, Drew. Appreciate
Sure.
that.
Thank
Barry,
you.
did you have any other questions or comments?
No, that answers my question, and that, I'm really not interested in Arnold's statistic, to be honest with you. I'm really not interested in Hazelwood statistics or any of those. We're talking about St. Charles County. We're talking about one municipality in St. Charles County that uses red light cameras, so that's what I'm concerned with. And then the second part of it is if the courts are trending, and as he predicts, or that a year from now, this is gonna be a non-issue. Okay, that's just my thoughts.
Mike first, and then,
I think, John,
No,
John, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay,
I just wanted to confirm,
so
so
you're next.
most of these cases that are on appeal right now, they've been ruled against the red light cameras, and the red light cameras are the ones that are appealing?
Yes.
So that's why we're expecting it to go that way.
Correct. And as I said, the last year and a half, 2 years, the trend has really changed. Both Western and Eastern District have ruled several ordinances to be unconstitutional.
Excellent. Thank you.
John, did you have some question? Okay,
Sorry, Matt.
Joe, and then Dan.
I think a big question of this council is this. We've had frosty relations St. Charles County has with City of St. Peter's for quite a few years. predating this administration. There's some other cities that are opposing this as well because they think we're stretching our powers in the places where we shouldn't be. If these things are going away by the way of a dodo bird in a year anyway, is it really worth alienating one of our largest cities, getting some other cities mad at us when it's going to be gone in a year anyway? Not only that, but you do have costs involved with putting that before the ballot, on the ballot before the voters. It's going to cost some money. And you know what, Joe, I know what you're going to say, but the numbers that I got when I was working on the smoking issue, it costs a lot of money. Now, some people say zero, some people say 200 grand. We can pull those numbers up later, but it's still money either way. So to me, it's like much ado about nothing. It's going to go away in a year anyway. And St. Peter's is only writing 30 a month anyway.
Joe, I'll go ahead and let you respond, then we'll get back to Dan.
Okay, couple of things. It's not costing any money at all. I talked to Christopher and Bob Schneider, it's a zero, because we already have a ballot initiative, or we're paying for the ballot anyway. All you gotta do is add it to the print, okay? So it costs nothing. So this is the time to do it. If you're gonna use that argument, then you can't support any of Mr. Elman's charter amendments either, and that should go across the board here.
I think it's, because I tell you what, the cost of that election depends on who you talk to within county
Okay,
government.
second, number two, you just read that you want to support the Constitution. Every council member up there swore to uphold the Constitution, and in every case, this red light camera's been proven unconstitutional. Next thing is you know, we set up on this council, and often we don't do a whole lot, and that's a fact, and you guys know we talk about that, and when we have an opportunity to do something, make a difference, you should do it, because it's our job to know right from wrong, or you shouldn't be elected if you don't know right from wrong. And the fact is if you are up here to support your residents of this county, and with all the information provided for you, you should have the courage to do what's right. Even if we think it's going to happen in a year and a half, it doesn't matter. We need to do what's right. And these red light cameras are wrong, period. And so that's what I'm asking the council to do, have some courage and stand up and do the right thing. And we'll have a lot more debate on this, but I'm just saying.
Yep. Danny has the floor.
Based upon your argument, I'd have to say really the argument comes down to two paragraphs, Article 1, Section 1, and Article 1, Section 2 of the Missouri Constitution. It says the power is derived from the people, and the people of St. Charles County and of Missouri are affected by the decisions of St. Peter's. The people driving through there are the ones getting the tickets. And the second section says that we are to give these protections to the people, and when the cities fail to give these protections, they have failed in their chief design. So if St. Peter's is denying the people of Missouri and failing in their chief design, then give the people who have the power the vote to make the decision.
Okay. Matt, and then we're going to wrap this up.
Okay, I just wanted to raise the issue real quick, because you may not have thought about it, because I knew when I was in office, I didn't think about it until it approached me. But third and fourth class cities under Missouri statute, so St. Peter's, don't have the legal authority to conduct initiative or referendum. There's no governing state statute that authorizes that, which means, and the reason why I'm saying this is, they literally, at the municipal level, folks that live in St. Peter's don't have a voice beyond electing their elected officials. In the city of Arnold, we got 1,000 signatures out of 13,000 registered voters in the week between Christmas and New Year's to put red light cameras on the ballot, even as a non-binding, basically an advisory measure. And though, overwhelmingly, we secured far and away past what any, if there was any statutes that do exist for charters, we secured by and away more than that. We weren't able to put it on the ballot due to our city attorney basically arguing against it. But where I'm going with that is to say the folks in St. Peter's, I mean, you guys are their voice when it comes to initiative or referendum issues. They don't have a voice themselves under state statute.
Thank you. I actually didn't realize that.
I always took it for granted and assumed it was.
Mr. Allen.
Mr. Chairman, I know St. Peter's, if you'd like to discuss it in this public, because they do have litigation. But if there are questions you would like the staff to try to find answers to, let us know. I think we'll be able to look at their records and whatnot and determine the answers to most of those questions.
I appreciate that, Steve. Thank you. Anything else? We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll reconvene for the regular meeting.